welcome to Buffalo Good. You've landed on the show where we interview interesting people who live here in the city of Buffalo. And today, very excited to have my friend, actually Rebecca Watson. She's joining us, and Rebecca is correct me if I miss anything, freelance writer.
Yes.
You are the creator of Skepchick.
Yes.
Yes, we'll talk about that a little bit later. You are on Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, a podcast.
Yes.
And that podcast gets over 100,000 downloads a week?
Yes.
Okay, very good. What else are you? You're pretty fabulous.
Yes. This is the easiest interview I've ever done so far. Keep going.
Sure.
Keep going.
No, so you're pretty great. You moved to Buffalo a few years ago, and in the interest of full disclosure, I've become your friend. I've gotten to know you over these years and stuff.
Yes.
How long have you been in Buffalo?
I think I've been here just about exactly 2 years now, I think. Maybe 3. 3 years.
3 years now.
Time flies.
And what brought you here?
I came here because my boyfriend lived here, and it seemed like a good idea for us to be in the same city together. So, yeah, he worked for Center for Inquiry, which is an organization devoted to spreading skepticism and humanism throughout the world.
Mm-hmm. They're located here?
They're in Amherst, New York.
Really?
Yep. And so he did their podcast for them. So, yeah, I'm a freelance writer, so I can go anywhere I want.
Wow.
So I chose Buffalo.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Pretty great.
I left London for Buffalo.
London, England.
London, England, yes.
Was that a bit of a culture shock?
It was welcome, actually, because I didn't like London very much.
Really?
Yeah, it's sprawling, and I could never see my friends, and because it takes hours to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of pollution.
Okay.
And everything closes at 10 p.m.
Okay.
So
before London,
yeah.
Were you living in England or?
No, before London I was in Boston.
Massachusetts.
Wow. And before that I was in Seattle.
World traveler.
I get around.
Yes, yeah.
That's what they say.
It's a funny girl. So you've been all these places. You're bouncing around. You're a freelance writer. Mm-hmm. You end up here in Buffalo. Now, one of the things that I love about Buffalo is that it's inexpensive, right? So It's a place where somebody who is a freelance writer can kind of plop down and do their thing. Now, as a freelance writer, what do you typically write about?
Well, I'm very, very lucky because basically I write about anything that catches my fancy, but that includes mostly things in the area of science, pretty much any science, but mostly new and emerging technologies and interesting research that I like. So I write about science, I write about critical thinking, about skepticism, basically science as it's applied to everyday life. I write about feminism, about women's rights, about other areas of social justice, and atheism and secularism and religion, and sometimes all of those things together.
That's a lot of things.
It is a lot of things. Yeah.
And do you find that often they come together?
Surprisingly often, actually, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, for instance, let's take the Republicans' war on women of the past several years. It's been gaining momentum in the United States and elsewhere. They make a lot of claims when it comes to restricting women's reproductive health. And some of those claims can be subjected to scientific scrutiny.
Can you give me an example?
I would love to.
It writes itself.
Yeah. For instance, the idea that abortions cause depression. That's something that we can look at. There's research that can show us whether or not women who get abortions are more likely to contract depression, and also how that compares to women who carry through with births that they either want or don't want. Mm-hmm. What we can see is that, by and large, no, abortion doesn't cause depression. Similarly, cancer has been another risk associated with abortion by the religious right. Again, we can look at the science on this and we can say pretty much without a doubt that no, abortion does not significantly increase a woman's risk of cancer. And these are pseudoscientific bits of misinformation that are being spread largely because of religious ideology that people are attempting to insert into politics. So I think that's a really good example of an area where you have overlapping issues of feminism and women's rights to their reproductive freedom, secularism, the importance of keeping religion out of our government, and skepticism and scientific inquiry, the importance of examining claims in a cold and logical way that allows us to separate truth from fiction.
Okay, that's interesting you say a cold and logical way, because quite often in society, the layman may feel that women are different from men because men are cold and logical and women are not. Do you encounter that a great deal?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's some pseudoscience that's been floating around for quite a long time. I would say centuries, but I know that centuries ago it was the opposite. Women were seen as cold, and men were seen as hot and full of passion.
Really?
Yeah, these things tend to flip every couple of centuries.
We usually call those people Italian. Full of the ciao,
right.
That thing. Anyhow, but
yeah, and the idea though that women are ruled by emotions and can't use logic and reason to make sound decisions has been used for quite a long time to restrict women's rights. If you look back at arguments against allowing women to vote, you see that come up again and again and again. This idea that if we let women vote, they're going to vote with their hormones, and then who knows what's going to happen. Chickens will be in the White House and things like that. And, we've actually seen that argument come up again just in, I think it was last year, it might have been the year before. A preacher went on Fox News and made that exact same argument, that women are so emotional. Mm-hmm. That's why we have politicians who are making silly decisions in office right now, and maybe we should just go back to the days when women didn't vote.
Wow, because of course, when women didn't vote, we never had problems.
Right.
We never had political problems, and we never had people making stupid decisions.
Right.
Beforehand. I don't know exactly if that's a logical fallacy or whatnot that I'm just using, but it kind of, I'm thinking with my gut.
Yeah.
I'm thinking with my gut.
Yeah.
So, do you find that there are places in this country that are maybe hotbeds of this? Would you say, well, first of all, would you say there's a movement to what you're doing in terms of skepticism and feminism, skepticism coming together? Is there a movement of that in the United States? And if there is, do you find that there are areas which are hotbeds for that?
Yeah, I think that there's a worldwide movement of people who are getting more involved in critical thinking as a way of life.
Critical thinking. I'm going to stop right there
Yeah.
for anybody who may be turning this on and just thinking, wow, they don't have a Bible in front of them, because this is a channel that quite often does that. You're mentioning critical thinking. What do you mean when you say critical thinking?
Well, when I talk about critical thinking, I'm talking about, the way I like to describe it is the scientific method applied to everyday life. It's a way of thinking critically about, I shouldn't use the phrase in the definition, I apologize.
It's okay.
It's a way of thinking about our world with a logical eye, with an eye towards science and reason. And, the skeptical community, the skeptical movement, if you will, for a long time has been focused on issues like psychics, for instance. Are psychics real? And that's actually how I got involved in the skeptical community, was because I was a magician, and there's this huge overlap between skeptics and magicians, because what we notice is, we become students of how people get fooled and how easy it is to fool yourself and fool other people.
Okay.
And so what we see are psychics who are using magic tricks, but passing them off as real supernatural abilities. And they're doing that, and they're taking people's money.
Mm-hmm.
And many magicians see that as grossly unethical.
Well, caveat emptor, buyer beware. People are allowed, in this country at least, to be stupid with their money, and boy, do they get to do that all the time, right? So
they're certainly allowed.
Now, I hear this all the time about things like psychics and even Bigfoot. I imagine that would be part of it, right?
Yep.
This pseudoscience idea you're talking about. What's the harm? Why? Okay, if somebody wants to feel better about their friend's mother dying because a psychic told them that the friend's mother is now in heaven and is looking down and is taking care and watching out for her grandkids right now, what's the harm in that?
I'll be honest, sometimes there is no harm. Sometimes I really do think, I went to a Bigfoot convention not too far from Buffalo earlier this year.
Where was it?
Fun.
I bet it was. Where was it?
Oh God, I don't remember.
Okay.
Some lake
Some
about
lake.
an hour away.
Okay, well,
east.
okay,
That
right.
helps.
Sure, it does.
Pinpoint the
The
location.
Finger Lakes that it could have
Yeah,
been.
one of those.
Cayuga Lake, maybe?
That
I
sounds
don't know.
right.
It sounds...
Maybe.
So, was there... Now, did they
It
claim...
was a lot of fun.
Did they claim there was a Bigfoot there, or...
Bigfoot did not attend. They kept a spot open for him just in case.
Do they? Is it kind of like, what is that, the Jewish holiday where they leave the seat open for...
Right, for departed
for Elijah the
relatives,
prophet?
Oh, okay.
Does he show
yeah.
up?
Yeah, just in case.
They do
They
that.
pour him a glass of
Just for Passover.
Bigfoot juice.
That's what he would drink.
Yeah,
Of course.
It was a lot of fun, and I
Mhm.
don't think anybody there was being harmed by the $10 or whatever they paid to get in and spend their afternoon learning about Bigfoot. But that said, sometimes there is a harm, even in things that we at first think of as not very harmful. Even in the case of Bigfoot, last year there was a guy who dressed up as Bigfoot and went out into the woods and was hit by a car because he was in the dark and he was trying to, cause a scare. And he was hit by a car and he was killed.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, that's more of what's the harm of being an idiot.
Yeah, really.
But when it comes to psychics, recently Sylvia Browne passed away.
Mhm.
She caused a great deal of harm in her lifetime. And I think that it's worth remembering that, especially on the occasion of her passing, so that she's not remembered as some sort of angel who just made people feel better about their dead loved ones.
Mhm.
In fact, she told people, for instance, she told parents that their son had been brutally murdered when in fact he was discovered, he had been kidnapped and was being kept in the town just next door to them.
Oh.
She told the parents of Opal Jo Jennings that the girl had been kidnapped and sold into sex slavery in Japan
Oh.
when in fact the girl had been murdered.
Oh, gracious.
She told, I could go through it.
Yeah, the phrase I've
a long
heard
list.
thrown about with her is grief vampire,
Yeah.
and I think it's pretty nasty to say, but yeah, she can be. But so there can be this harm when people are taken advantage of. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to talk to you about, though, because I'm impressed and I'm thankful for the work you are doing in combating anti-vaccination misinformation, basically,
Yeah.
from all sides, right and left side of the political spectrum,
Mhm.
which is interesting. It's not a Republican, it's not a Democrat thing. It's just very, very dangerous. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing to promote vaccination?
Sure, yeah. Vaccines are one of our pet issues at Skepchick and also something I talk about on
Skepchick, sorry to interrupt again.
Yeah.
Skepchick is...
My website.
Your website.
It's skepchick.org, skepchick.org.
Okay, we'll put that up on the screen.
Great. It's technology.
I know, it happens.
Yeah, Skepchick is a group blog of mostly women who blog about all those things I mentioned that I like to talk about. Skepticism, science, critical thinking, sexism, religion, things like that. And a while back, we all were chatting and we started talking about what is one area that we like to delve into that's within our sphere where we could make a real difference in people's lives. And what we all agreed on was that one of those things was vaccination. And Vaccines are, at this point in time, for the most part, are incredibly safe and easy to get and could do away with some really horrific diseases. Things like polio, for example. Polio is not something that most of us at our age even understand anymore, how horrific it is. And that's thanks to vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people spreading misinformation about vaccines. People like Jenny McCarthy, who gets a mouthpiece on big shows like Oprah and The View.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells parents that they should be afraid to give their children vaccines. She tells them that vaccines may cause autism, which study after study after study shows that vaccines have absolutely nothing to do with autism.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nothing. But she keeps spreading this misinformation, and she is responsible for an actual death count at this point. Whooping cough is another disease that we should be rid of. We have a vaccine that is extremely safe, very easy to get, and very, very, very effective.
Okay. Now, you've just said study after study after study after study has shown that vaccines do not cause autism.
Correct.
Presumably, Jenny McCarthy and the anti-vaccination people have access to this information as well. Why do you think they continue spreading this misinformation if real good science is out there? What is behind it? Why do you think they do it?
I think, it's difficult for me to comment on the motivations of any one person, and particularly of an entire group, because I think that there are many different motivations within that group. One motivation may be rather cynical, selling books and selling faux diet treatments and things like that to supposedly help autistic children, but which, of course, have no actual basis in science. And so there is a penny to be made out of this fear-mongering. That's not what I'm suggesting Jenny McCarthy is doing, but it may be something that some people in the movement are doing. There's also the idea that they reject science. There are people within that community that believe that big pharma is controlling these studies, that there's a conspiracy, often government-based, a conspiracy to keep out the truth about vaccines. And then, for me, the largest problem, and this is something that I'm really proud of my other Skepchick writers for doing. They've done some really amazing work. Some of them who are mothers, particularly Elise Anders is a mother on Skepchick. She went out and she formed an entire organization devoted to vaccine awareness. And they went out to conventions and places where they could find parents, and they conducted surveys to find out why people actually weren't vaccinating their kids.
Okay.
And what they found is fantastic. If you go on Skepchick, you can read their full report. And what we find are that, often parents are just misinformed. They just don't know this information. They're not getting it. Often we find that parents are just scared. It can be really scary to suddenly have this little kid and you don't know what to do with it. And some doctor is just injecting them with things and they're not explaining what's happening.
Sure. And the mothers hear and the fathers hear that they're being injected with mercury.
Right.
With very scary sounding things, formaldehyde that are actually in vaccines or different vaccines and whatnot.
And I should say that the mercury claim is particularly ridiculous because mercury was blamed. It was part of thimerosal, a preservative, and research showed that it had absolutely no effect on the children, that it was not to cause for autism, but it was still removed from vaccines. Mm-hmm. But people like Jenny McCarthy continued to promote the idea that mercury is in vaccines and that it causes autism, two things that are untrue.
So what has Skepchick done? What did you do to be proactive?
Well, in addition to running these surveys and to discover exactly why parents aren't vaccinating their kids, that is translated into also writing more posts about, educating people, parents in particular, on the safety of vaccines and encouraging people to get vaccinated. And then we've also set up actual vaccine clinics. We go to conferences where people will be flying in from all over the world and congregating, and we vaccinate them for free. We've worked with the CDC in order to get free vaccines. The nurses volunteer their time.
Wait, you actually have people on hand that will give the vaccines out and to people, that will give them shots and stuff?
Yeah.
Now you have, is time donated from the medical professionals?
It's all donated, yeah. They're
Wow.
really amazing. We had a contact at the CDC who helped us arrange it all, and he would help us get local nurses, and they would come out and they would administer the vaccines. And they told us in many of these places where we ran these clinics, the nurses would tell us, sometimes we run vaccine clinics and literally no one shows up all day, but we would have like a line out the door constantly because we would just be going out and yelling at people and telling them to get in and get vaccinated.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was great because at the same time, people would get vaccinated and they would learn, we would give them pamphlets, teach them about vaccination in the hopes that they could go and share that information as well. Or if they have children, that they will not be scared of vaccinating their kids. So we also have fought directly against anti-vaccination groups. A few years ago, we found out a few days before it was going to happen that an anti-vaccination group would be running an ad in AMC theaters Thanksgiving weekend that basically told people not to vaccinate their children. We started a letter writing campaign and a petition, and petitioned AMC successfully to pull that ad. So, when we see things like that happen, we try to motivate our base to react and to do something good.
Again, people, I hear this. Well, just say a mother or father is afraid to vaccinate their child. They say, I'm not going to do it, and I'm going to keep my house clean, my kid's not going to get it, all that kind of stuff. What's the harm if my kid doesn't get vaccinated? What's that doing to you? That doesn't affect you at all, is what they're thinking. What is the harm there?
Yeah, well, there is a good chance that, someone could not vaccinate their children will never get that particular disease. But there's a thing called herd immunity. And herd immunity is what we talk about when we talk about enough people in a population being vaccinated to the point that we can end that disease. And not only is it helpful for ending a disease completely, but it's also helpful for all of the people who can't get vaccinated. Okay. These people include newborn infants. They include immunocompromised individuals. And so these people can't get vaccinated, so they're walking around, they're in the grocery store with you. If they get the disease, they are done for. And so that's why you need to get vaccinated. And I'll use the flu vaccine as an example. It's something that I myself for a very long time thought, why should I bother? I never get the flu. Well, I don't. But you know who does? Elderly people, infants, immunocompromised people. And the problem with that is that I might be a carrier and I might not even know that I've got a disease that I'm then going to pass along. If I get vaccinated, I increase the possibility that we could achieve herd immunity and that people who are immunocompromised can be safe, because the flu kills. The flu kills elderly people. It's not just the sniffles. It actually kills.
I have a friend of mine whose sister is a medical professional. She's a nurse. And she has taken onto Facebook this campaign because she is very upset that she is forced, in her words, forced to get the flu vaccine because she's a medical professional.
Yeah.
Now, she has the option that if she does not get the shot, she must wear a mask. And in her case, she's better off for it. That's a terrible thing to say.
Terrible thing to say.
Anyway. She's a lovely lady.
I'm going to get angry emails over that.
No, she's a lovely lady. She really is. She's a lovely lady. But you know what? Ugliest to the bone. Ugliest to the bone. Anyway, so she is ranting about this, and I am just so upset with that, with her stand and the misinformation that she's doing and the fear that she's putting out there. What is your suggestion for somebody like me who is angry at this? Do I start a flame war on Facebook? What do you do in that situation when you have somebody who's close to you who is spreading that kind of stuff?
That's a huge question. And I know we're running out of time, so I will try to keep this short.
We have plenty of time, please.
But what I always recommend is if somebody close to you believes in something that may even be harmful, but some sort of pseudoscience that you'd like to disabuse them of, berating them generally does not help in my experience. What does help is planting a seed of doubt in their mind, because by and large, no one is going to change their mind mid-argument. It never happens. But what does happen is someone will walk away from a discussion rolling around what you said in their head, and days, weeks, months, years later, with some careful watering, that seed will grow.
Okay.
I'm going to drop the tortured metaphor now and just say that the idea is that the person will come around to your way of thinking, but they'll think that they did it themselves.
Okay.
And that's, to me, that's the best way to do it.
Do you have, okay, speaking just about vaccinations, do you have one or two bullet points that you would suggest? You say, hey, if I'm gonna have this conversation with this person, and yes, she's a medical professional and she went to school for it, and she's an intelligent woman. She is. Obviously, she's an intelligent woman. She's a nurse. She studied hard. She's actually a very lovely woman. She's a lovely woman to be around. She's just got this idea about vaccines. What are the one or two points that you would maybe drop in there that you would?
Well, the most important thing to do first and foremost is to find out what her objections are exactly. Is she objecting on the safety issue? Is she going for the government conspiracy idea? You need to understand exactly where she's coming from if you hope to sort of make an impact on her. One thing I recommend is I like to recommend people use other media sources and give that to someone and sort of walk away and let them deal with that. And the number one thing I can suggest for vaccines is a documentary called Jabbed. Made by this amazing Australian director. It's one of the most important documentaries I've ever seen. It talks about the actual dangers that can arise from vaccines, and in doing so is so brutally honest in its portrait of vaccines that I've spoken to the director about this, and she has seen it actually change people's minds on the spot. Like, people who worked on the documentary with her were vaccine deniers who came around by the end of filming to say, you know what? Okay, you're right. Vaccines are safe and effective, and we should get vaccinated.
Wow.
So Jabbed is one thing. Another thing for people who are interested in alternative medicine as a whole, which tends to overlap quite heavily with the anti-vaccine crowd, Trick or Treatment is a fantastic book by my friend Simon Singh and Edzard Ernst, and it's written with that person in mind, the person who loves alternative medicine and maybe just doesn't understand the value of science. It's a way of gently introducing them to the scientific method in a way that's very positive and not at all attacking their core beliefs.
Rebecca, I have to say, you are fascinating, and I could sit and listen to you talk for hours and hours and hours.
You have.
No, unfortunately, we don't have that amount of time, but I want to thank you very much for joining us here.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. This was a lot of fun.
On Buffalo Good. Yeah. So this was Buffalo Good. This is Rebecca Watson, and we're going to have all the information up on the screen for you. Thank you for tuning in, and peace.